Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight we're heading into the frozen lands of Alaska with 7 most disturbing, true Alaskan missing tourists horror stories. These stories come from rescue workers, park workers, tour guides, and other travelers who saw something in Alaska that they can't forget. Each story is about tourists who went missing in Alaska's wild places, where the cold can kill you and the land goes on forever. These stories come from missing person reports, rescue records, and interviews with people who survived to tell what happened. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button on Mr. Midnight for true horror stories every day. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. Now let's look at these 7 scary cases where tourists went into Alaska's dangerous wilderness and either never came back or returned changed forever by what they found in the land where the sun doesn't set in summer and doesn't rise in winter. My name is Lisa Martinez, and I've been working retail for 8 years. I started at Target when I was 20, moved up to assistant manager at a sporting goods store, and now I run the outdoor gear section at REI in Sacramento. I know camping equipment inside and out, which tents hold up in bad weather, which sleeping bags work in freezing temps, which boots won't fall apart after 100 miles. I've helped thousands of customers plan their perfect outdoor trips. My boyfriend Mike is an electrician. He's been doing it for 12 years since he got out of high school. He wires houses, fixes power lines, and knows every tool in his truck better than most people know their own cars. We both love the outdoors. We camp almost every weekend during the season, and we're not the kind of people who stay at campgrounds with bathrooms and fire rings. We go deep into the wilderness where there's no cell service, no other people, and no easy way out if things go wrong. But what happened in Southeast Alaska last September changed everything I thought I knew about what's really out there in the wild places. Some things look human, but aren't human at all. The trip started like any other camping adventure. Mike had 2 weeks off work, and I'd saved up vacation time all year. We wanted to go somewhere completely different, somewhere we'd never been. Alaska seemed perfect. Huge wilderness, amazing scenery, and hardly any people once you get away from the main roads. We flew into Fairbanks and rented a pickup truck with 4-wheel drive. The plan was simple. Drive the Dalton Highway north toward the Arctic Circle, find a good spot to set up camp, and spend a week completely disconnected from civilization. The Dalton Highway is this long, mostly gravel road that goes through some of the most remote country in North America. It's the same road they use to supply the oil fields up north. So we loaded the truck with everything we needed: a 4-season tent that could handle wind and rain, sleeping bags rated to 20 below, a camp stove, 2 weeks worth of food, water purification tablets, and all our hiking gear. Mike brought his basic electrical tools, just in case we had problems with the truck's electrical system. I brought a GPS unit, paper maps, and a satellite communicator for real emergencies. The first day of driving was incredible. The road wound through forests and mountains, crossing rivers on narrow bridges. We saw caribou, a few moose, and an eagle circling overhead. The farther north we got, the fewer vehicles we saw. By evening, we were driving for hours without seeing another soul. Around 9 p.m., we stopped for gas in a tiny place called Coldfoot. It's basically just a gas station, a small store, and a few buildings for the people who work there. The sun was still up. This far north in September, it doesn't get dark until late. The guy who ran the gas station was probably in his 60s with a thick gray beard and hands that looked like they'd been working outside for decades. When he saw all our camping gear in the truck bed, he shook his head. "You folks planning to camp up north?" he asked. "Yeah," Mike said. "We're looking for a good spot, maybe another 50 miles up the road." The old man's face got serious. "You want my advice? Turn around and head back south. Camp somewhere closer to the road. Somewhere other people go." I laughed. "We're experienced campers. We know what we're doing." "It's not about camping skills," he said. "There's something up there, something that looks like a person but isn't." Mike and I looked at each other. We'd heard stories like this before. Local legends, urban myths, people trying to scare tourists. "What kind of something?" I asked, trying to be polite. "The native folks up here have a word for it, but us white folks just call it the thing that changes shape. It can look like a regular person, talks like a person, acts friendly, but it's not human. It's hungry, and it feeds on people. Mike paid for the gas. Thanks for the warning, but we'll be fine. We've got good gear, and we know how to take care of ourselves. The old man just shrugged. Your choice. But if you see anyone else camping out there, anyone at all, you get in your truck and drive away fast. Don't talk to them, don't try to be friendly, just leave. We drove away thinking the guy was just a lonely old-timer who'd spent too many years in the middle of nowhere. Every remote area has stories like that. Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, the Jersey Devil back east, chupacabras in the desert. We figured Alaska had its own version. About 60 miles north of Coldfoot, we found the perfect spot. The road curved around a small mountain, and there was a dirt track that led down into a valley. We followed it for maybe 2 miles until it ended at a clearing next to a stream. The spot was perfect. Flat ground for the tent, fresh water, beautiful views of the mountains on all sides, and completely hidden from the main road. We set up camp before it got dark. Mike rigged a tarp between 2 trees to give us extra covered space. I organized our food and set up the camp kitchen. We had everything we needed for a week of comfortable camping. The first day was amazing. We hiked up the ridge behind our camp, took hundreds of photos, and saw a family of doll sheep on a distant mountainside. That night we made a campfire, cooked dinner, and went to sleep listening to the stream and the wind in the trees. The second day started the same way. We hiked in a different direction, following the stream up toward its source. Mike found some interesting rocks that had metals in them. He could tell because of his electrical work. I identified different plants using a field guide we'd brought. But that evening, just as we were starting dinner, I saw something that made me stop stirring the pot. "Mike," I said quietly, "look over there on the other side of the valley." He looked where I was pointing. About a mile away, up on the opposite ridge, there was a small orange glow. "Campfire," he said. "Someone else found this valley." We watched the distant fire for a few minutes. It was definitely a camp, and it looked like just one person from the size of the fire. "Should we go say hello?" I asked. Mike thought about it. "Why not? We're probably the only people for 50 miles. Might be nice to talk to another camper." We finished eating, put our fire out safely, and grabbed flashlights. The hike across the valley took about 30 minutes in the growing darkness. As we got closer, we could smell wood smoke and see a single tent set up near the fire. A woman was sitting beside the fire, and she waved when she saw our flashlights. "Hello?" she called out. "I was wondering if I was the only person crazy enough to camp out here." She looked completely normal, maybe 35, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing hiking clothes that looked well used but good quality. She had a nice smile and seemed genuinely happy to see other people. "I'm Maria," she said, standing up to shake hands. "I'm from Seattle. Been hiking solo up here for about a week." "I'm Lisa, this is Mike," I said. "We're from California. This is our second night here." "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Maria said, looking around at the mountains. "I do a lot of solo hiking, but this is the most remote place I've ever been. Sit down, please." I was just making some tea. We sat by her fire and talked for about an hour. Maria seemed like any other experienced hiker. She knew about gear, had stories about other trips, and asked good questions about our plans for the rest of the week. But there were little things that seemed off. First, I never saw her blink. Not once in the whole hour we were there. Her eyes stayed wide open, even when smoke from the fire drifted toward her face. Second, when she looked directly at me or Mike, her eyes reflected the firelight like an animal's eyes do. Humans don't have that kind of eye reflection, but cats and dogs do. And third, she offered to share food with us. She had some kind of meat cooking on a stick over the fire. But it smelled wrong. Not like beef or chicken or even game meat. It smelled rotten and sweet at the same time, like roadkill that had been sitting in the sun. "Would you like some dinner?" she asked, pulling the stick out of the fire. "It's venison. I got lucky hunting yesterday." The meat was dark red, almost black, and it was dripping juice that looked too thick to be normal. "Thanks, but we already ate," Mike said politely. Maria's friendly smile disappeared instantly. Her face went completely blank and her voice changed from warm to ice cold. "Are you sure? I have plenty." We're good, I said, standing up. We should probably get back to our camp. Long day tomorrow. Of course, Maria said, but her voice still sounded wrong. Maybe I'll stop by your camp tomorrow. We could hike together. We said goodbye and hiked back across the valley. Neither of us talked much on the way back. Something weird about her, Mike said when we got back to our tent. Yeah, did you notice her eyes? And that meat smelled like death. We zipped ourselves into the tent and tried to sleep, but I kept thinking about Maria's eyes and her strange reaction when Mike declined her food. Around 2 a.m, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside our tent. Soft steps, like someone trying to be quiet, circling our campsite. I nudged Mike awake and put my finger to my lips. We lay there listening. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent door, and we could see a shadow through the thin tent wall. The shadow looked tall, much taller than Maria had been when we met her. Mike very slowly reached for the tent zipper and opened it just a crack so he could look outside. I heard him take a sharp breath. Maria was there, but she looked different. She was crouched over our food supplies, which we'd hung from a tree branch to keep them away from bears. But she wasn't trying to eat our food. She was doing something to it, rubbing it with her hands, and her hands were dripping some kind of dark, oily liquid onto our packages. Then she turned toward our tent, and Mike got a clear look at her face in the moonlight. Her mouth had stretched out into a long snout filled with sharp teeth. Her fingers had grown into claws. Her whole face had changed into something that looked like a cross between a human and a wild animal. Mike slowly zipped the tent closed and grabbed my arm. "We have to get out of here," he whispered in my ear. "Right now." We quietly packed our most important gear: water, warm clothes, the satellite communicator, and Mike's truck keys. We left the tent set up and crawled out the back, away from where Maria was contaminating our food. We started creeping toward where we'd parked the truck, moving as quietly as possible through the trees. But Maria had heard us. "Lisa," she called out in a sing-song voice that sounded like a little girl. "Mike, where are you going? I have something special for you." Her voice was coming from the trees to our left, but then we heard it again from the right side. "Don't leave yet. I'm still hungry, and you look so delicious." We reached the truck and Mike fumbled with the keys. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely get the key in the door. That's when Maria stepped out of the trees directly in front of the truck. She looked completely different now. Her arms and legs were too long for her body, and she moved like a spider, all jerky and wrong. Her face was still partly human, but her mouth was full of teeth, and her eyes were solid black. "You can't leave," she said, and her voice was now a deep growl. "I'm still hungry." Mike got the truck started and threw it in drive. He gunned the engine straight toward her, but Maria jumped impossibly high, like she was on springs. She leaped right over the truck and landed on the roof behind us. Immediately, she started tearing at the metal roof with her claws. The sound was horrible, like fingernails on a chalkboard, but much louder and more violent. Mike was driving as fast as he could on the rough dirt track, swerving back and forth to try to throw her off, but Maria held on. Her clawed hand punched through the roof and grabbed Mike's shoulder. "Stop the truck," she hissed. "Let me in." That's when we hit the tree. Mike was trying to shake off her grip on his shoulder, and he lost control of the steering. The truck slammed into a big pine tree on the passenger side. The windshield exploded, the airbags went off, and everything went silent for a few seconds. Then, Maria reached down through the hole she'd torn in the roof and started dragging Mike up through it. I scrambled out through the broken windshield and ran. I didn't look back, didn't try to help Mike, didn't think about anything except getting away. I just ran through the dark forest, branches tearing at my clothes and face. Behind me, I heard Mike screaming, and then I heard Maria making sounds that weren't human at all, growling and snarling like a wild animal feeding. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Then I hid under some fallen logs and waited for dawn. It took me 3 days to walk back to the main road. When I finally got cell service, I called 911. The Alaska State Troopers found our wrecked truck and the remains of our campsite, but they never found Mike's body. They never found any trace of Maria either. The official report said Mike probably died in the crash and his body was carried off by scavengers. They said I was traumatized and confused about what really happened. I tried to tell them about Maria, about the creature that looked human but wasn't, but they didn't believe me. The old man at the gas station in Coldfoot had moved away by the time the Trout. Opers investigated. There was no record of anyone named Maria getting camping permits for that area. I quit my job at REI when I got back to California. I couldn't stand helping people plan camping trips, knowing what might be waiting for them out there in the wilderness. I work at a regular department store now in the middle of town, selling clothes to people who probably never go more than a mile from the nearest Starbucks. Mike and I had been together for 4 years. We were talking about getting married. Now he's gone, and I'm the only one who knows the truth about what took him. I don't go camping anymore. I don't even like being outside after dark, because I know that somewhere out there, things that look human are waiting for people who wander too far from safety. If you're planning a camping trip to a remote area and some local person warns you about something strange, listen to them. Don't laugh it off like we did. And if you ever meet another camper in the middle of nowhere, someone who seems just a little bit wrong, get in your car and drive away as fast as you can. Because some things in the wilderness are hungry, and they're very good at looking human until it's too late. My name is Maria Santos, and I'm a third-grade teacher from Phoenix, Arizona. I've been teaching kids for 8 years now, and I love every minute of it. My students call me Miss Maria, and I've always been the teacher who brings real snow in coolers when we study weather, or shows pictures of places I've visited during summer break. But I had never seen real winter before, never driven in snow, never felt cold that could actually hurt you. Growing up in Arizona, the coldest it ever got was maybe 40 degrees, and that was only for a few days in January. Last December, I decided to change that. I saved up money for 2 years to take my dream trip to Alaska. I wanted to see the northern lights, experience a real winter, maybe even go dog sledding. All my life, I'd been teaching kids about snow and ice, but I'd never touched it myself. What happened during those 3 days in December changed everything I thought I knew about cold weather. And it taught me that nature doesn't care how prepared you think you are. Sometimes the most beautiful places on Earth are also the most deadly. I landed in Anchorage on December 18th, 2023. The moment I stepped off the plane, the cold hit my face like a slap. It was only 10 degrees, but to me it felt like stepping into a freezer. I had to buy a real winter coat at the airport because the jacket I brought from Phoenix was basically useless. My plan was simple: rent an SUV, drive from Anchorage to Fairbanks, and find a good spot to watch the northern lights. The rental car guy, Bob, was this older Alaska native who looked at my Arizona driver's license and shook his head. "You ever driven in snow before?" he asked. "No, but I'm a careful driver," I told him. "I've been driving for 15 years without an accident." Bob walked me around the white Ford Explorer he'd given me. "This has all-wheel drive and new snow tires," he said, kicking one of the tires. "But tires don't mean much if you don't know how to use them. You feel the car sliding, don't hit the brakes hard, don't make sudden turns, and if the weather gets bad, pull over and wait." I nodded and took notes on my phone. As a teacher, I always took notes. I'd researched everything about this trip for months. I had emergency supplies in the back seat: water bottles, granola bars, a sleeping bag, and one of those thin emergency blankets that's supposed to keep you warm. The weather forecast looked perfect. Light snow possible, but nothing major. Highways were clear. It was a Tuesday afternoon, so traffic would be light. The drive from Anchorage to Fairbanks takes about 6 hours in good weather. I figured I'd be there by 8 p.m., plenty of time to find a motel and get ready for Northern Lights viewing. I called my mom before I left the rental car place. "I'm about to start driving," I told her. "Should be in Fairbanks tonight." "Be careful, baby," she said. "Call me when you get there." "Of course, Mom. I've got my phone plugged in and charged. GPS is working perfectly. I'll text you updates along the way." I felt confident as I pulled out of Anchorage. The roads were just wet, not icy. My phone showed 5 bars of signal. The SUV felt solid and safe. I'd studied the route online 100 times. It was just one main highway, the Parks Highway, straight north for 350 miles. What could go wrong? The first 30 miles went perfectly. I was driving about 45 miles per hour, being extra careful like Bob told me. The scenery was incredible, mountains and forests covered in white. I took pictures at red lights and sent them to my mom. "This is amazing," I texted her. "Never seen anything so beautiful." Then I noticed the sky changing. It had been light gray all day, typical winter weather. But now darker clouds were rolling in from the north. They looked thick and heavy, like the summer thunderstorms we get in Arizona, but gray instead of black. My phone weather app still showed light snow, nothing to worry about. But the temperature was dropping fast. When I left Anchorage, it was 10 degrees. Now it showed 2 degrees on the dashboard. The first snowflakes started hitting my windshield around mile 35, just a few at first, small and light. I turned on the wipers and they brushed away easily. I'd never seen snow falling before, and it was actually pretty, like tiny white stars dancing in my headlights. But within 10 minutes, those tiny flakes became bigger ones, and there were more of them. The wipers had to work harder to keep the windshield clear. I turned on the defrost and slowed down to 35 miles per hour. "Still good," I said out loud. Talking to myself is a habit I picked up from teaching, just taking it slow and careful. Then the wind picked up. At first it was just gentle gusts that rocked the SUV a little, but it got stronger fast. The snow wasn't falling straight down anymore. It was whipping sideways across the road. My headlights showed a white wall of moving snow instead of the road ahead. I checked my phone. The weather app was updating. "Heavy snow warning," it now said. "Travel not recommended." "What?" I said out loud. This wasn't in the forecast an hour ago. I tried calling the rental car place, but my phone only had 2 bars now. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried calling my mom, but it wouldn't even connect. The visibility was getting worse by the minute. I could barely see the yellow line in the middle of the road. My headlights just showed swirling white chaos. The wind was so loud I could hear it inside the car, even with the windows up and the radio on. I slowed down to 25 miles per hour, then 20. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. Every few seconds, a strong gust would push the SUV sideways, and I'd have to steer back toward the center of the road. That's when I realized I couldn't see the center of the road anymore. I pulled over as carefully as I could, or at least I thought I pulled over. In the whiteout, I couldn't tell where the shoulder ended and the ditch began. Everything was just white. White ground, white air, white everywhere. I put the car in park and turned on the hazard lights. Maybe other cars would see me. But as I sat there, I realized I hadn't seen another car in 20 minutes. I was alone on this highway with a blizzard that came out of nowhere. My GPS was acting weird. It kept showing different locations. First it said I was on Parks Highway mile 45, then mile 38, then mile 52. The little blue dot that showed my car was jumping around like it was confused. "Come on," I whispered, refreshing the GPS. But it just kept giving me wrong information. I tried calling 911. The phone showed 1 bar, then no bars, then 1 bar again. When I finally got through, all I heard was static and a voice cutting in and out. 911, what's your urgency? I'm stuck in a blizzard on Parks Highway, I said. I can't see anything. I need help. Can't hear you. Repeat your... Then the call dropped. No signal at all. I tried texting my mom. Stuck in bad storm. Can't drive. Waiting it out. But the message wouldn't send. It just sat there with a little spinning circle next to it. The snow was piling up on my windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. I had to turn them on the highest setting, and they made this awful scraping sound as they struggled with the weight of the snow. The wind was getting worse too. It wasn't just pushing the car anymore, it was shaking it. The whole SUV would rock back and forth when the strongest gusts hit. I started hearing new sounds. Metal creaking, like the car was under stress. I decided to keep the engine running for heat, but I was worried about gas. The tank was 3/4 full when I left Anchorage, but it was going down fast with the engine, idling. I turned off the heat for a few minutes to save fuel, but the inside of the car got cold so fast that I could see my breath. When I turned the heat back on, I noticed something scary. The windows were starting to ice over on the inside. Even with the defrost running, a thin layer of ice was forming on the passenger side window. "That's not normal," I said out loud. In Phoenix, I'd never seen ice form inside a car, but then again, it never got cold enough. I checked my phone for the temperature outside, minus 15 degrees, and falling. That's when the real fear started setting in. This wasn't just inconvenient anymore. This was dangerous. I was trapped in a car in sub-zero weather with a gas tank that wouldn't last forever and no way to call for help. I tried to stay calm by thinking like a teacher. What would I tell my students about this situation? Make a plan, stay warm, conserve resources, wait for help. But as the hours passed, it became clear that help wasn't coming anytime soon. By 8 p.m., the time I was supposed to be checking into a warm motel in Fairbanks, I was still stuck in the same spot. The blizzard wasn't letting up at all. If anything, it was getting worse. The wind was howling so loud it sounded like a jet engine. Snow was piling up against the car so high I couldn't see out the side windows anymore. I started the engine every 15 minutes to run the heat, then turned it off to save gas. But each time I turned it off, the car got cold faster than the time before. The metal was so cold now that it actually hurt to touch the door handles or window controls. My water bottles were starting to get slushy. Not frozen yet, but cold enough that drinking them made me shiver. The granola bars were so hard I could barely bite them. Around 10 p.m., I made a mistake that almost killed me. I was getting drowsy, a bad sign that I didn't recognize at the time. I felt warm and comfortable, even though the thermometer said it was minus 25 outside. I was thinking clearly, or so I thought. "I should get some fresh air," I said out loud. Clods are my head. I cracked the driver's side window just an inch. The wind hit me like a punch to the face. It didn't feel cold. It felt like burning. The air was so dry and frozen that it hurt to breathe. But instead of closing the window right away, I kept it open for several minutes. "This feels good," I remember thinking. I was getting too hot in here. That should have been my first warning sign. When you're getting hypothermia, your body stops sensing cold correctly. You actually feel hot, even when you're freezing to death. I don't remember closing the window, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was taking off my coat. "Too hot in here," I mumbled. Even though my breath was visible and there was ice forming on the inside of all the windows. I was having trouble thinking straight. Simple decisions became confusing. Should I start the car? Was I supposed to keep the engine running? Why was I so warm when it was so cold? That's when I heard my mom calling my name. "Maria! Maria, honey, come here!" Her voice was coming from outside the car, somewhere in the blizzard. "Mom?" I said, looking around. That didn't make sense. My mom was in Phoenix, but I could hear her voice clearly, even over the wind. "I'm right here, baby. Come outside. I'll help you." I knew I shouldn't open the door. Some part of my brain that was still working correctly was screaming at me not to do it. But I felt so confused and warm, and my mom sounded so close. I opened the driver's side door. The cold hit me like a physical attack. It stole the breath right out of my lungs and made my eyes water instantly. But instead of getting back in the car, I stepped outside into the snow. I was wearing just my jeans, t-shirt, and socks. No coat, no boots. The snow came up to my knees and immediately soaked through my clothes, but I couldn't feel it. The hypothermia had damaged my nervous system so badly that I couldn't sense temperature anymore. "Mom, where are you?" I called out. The wind was so loud I could barely hear my own voice. Snow whipped into my face and eyes, making it impossible to see more than a foot in any direction. But I kept walking away from the car, following my mom's voice. "Right here, Maria. Just a little further." I stumbled through the snow, my socks completely soaked, my feet going numb. I tripped and fell face first into a snowdrift, but it didn't feel cold. It felt soft and comfortable, like falling into a warm bed. I decided to rest there for a minute. That's when the peaceful feeling started. The wind didn't sound scary anymore. It sounded like music. The snow didn't feel cold. It felt like a blanket. I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt calm and sleepy and warm. I closed my eyes and listened to my heartbeat. It sounded really loud, like it was echoing inside my head, but it was getting slower and slower. Everything felt perfect. I don't remember anything else from that night. 3 days later, a search and rescue team found my rental car buried under 12 feet of snow. They said it was the worst sudden blizzard in Alaska's recorded history. 8 other tourists died that same week, all from hypothermia. They found me about 400 yards from the car, sitting upright in the snow like I was just taking a rest. The rescue team said I had a peaceful expression on my face. The medical examiner told my family that I died of severe hypothermia and that ice crystals had formed throughout my organs. But I'm still here, aren't I? I watch over that stretch of highway now. When the weather turns bad and tourists get trapped like I did, I try to help them. I call their names from outside their cars, but not to lead them into the snow like my confused, dying brain thought my mom was doing. I call to them to keep them awake, to keep them in their cars, to keep them alive until help comes. Sometimes it works. Sometimes they listen to the voice in the storm telling them to stay put, keep the engine running, stay warm. Sometimes they make it. But sometimes, when the hypothermia has already taken hold and their minds are playing tricks on them, they hear what they want to hear instead of what I'm actually saying. They hear their mothers calling them home, and they step out into the beautiful, deadly white, just like I did. The highway department put up new warning signs after that storm. Extreme weather possible, monitor conditions, travel with emergency supplies. But signs can't stop the kind of storm that killed me, the kind that comes out of nowhere and turns a routine drive into a fight for survival. If you're ever driving through Alaska in winter and the weather suddenly changes, remember my story. Stay in your car. Keep the engine running. Don't get out no matter what you think you hear calling your name. And if you hear a voice in the storm telling you to stay put and wait for help, listen to it. That voice might be me. My name is Steve Martinez, and I've been flying helicopters for 22 years. I started right out of high school, working search and rescue in Colorado. Then I moved to Alaska for oil rig support flights. Now I run glacier tours here in the Canadian Rockies. I've flown in blizzards, fog so thick you can't see your own rotor blades, and winds that could flip a chopper upside down. I've pulled people off mountain ledges and delivered supplies to places where roads don't exist. But what happened on March 15, 2024, on what should have been a simple engagement celebration flight, made me realize that sometimes nature doesn't follow the rules we think we know. I still fly helicopters, but I don't do glacier landings anymore. March 15th started like any other day at Mountain High helicopter tours. I got to the hangar at 6 a.m. to do my pre-flight checks on the Bell 407. She's a solid bird, 7 seats, twin-engine reliability, perfect for tourist flights. I've been flying this exact helicopter for 3 years without a single mechanical issue. The weather report showed clear skies, winds at 8 knots from the southwest, temperature at -2 Celsius. Perfect conditions for glacier landings. My first clients of the day were Tom and Ashley, a young couple from the States celebrating their engagement. Tom was a plumber from Ohio. Ashley worked as a waitress in Michigan. They'd saved up for months to afford this flight. $1,500 for the deluxe glacier landing package. When they showed up at 9 a.m., I could tell they were nervous about flying. Ashley kept gripping Tom's hand, and Tom kept asking questions about the helicopter's safety record. "Don't worry," I told them during the safety briefing. "I've done over 3,000 glacier tours. The weather's perfect today, and Athabasca Glacier has been stable all winter. We'll land right on the main ice field, where it's thick and solid." I've given that same speech 1,000 times. The helicopter holds 2 crew and 5 passengers. Emergency equipment is stored in compartments behind the rear seats. Life vests under each seat, emergency locator beacon, first aid kit, survival supplies for 3 days, standard Transport Canada requirements. I pointed out the emergency exits, showed them how to operate their headsets, explained the hand signals we'd use on the ice. The flight out to the glacier takes about 40 minutes from our base near Jasper. We followed Highway 93 north, then banked west toward the Columbia ice field. Tom and Ashley sat in the back row, holding hands and staring out the windows. Through their headsets, I could hear Ashley asking if the helicopter ever crashed during these tours. "Ma'am, I've never had an accident in 22 years of flying," I said. "Today won't be my first." The radio chatter was normal. A Parks Canada patrol helicopter checking trail conditions, a medical helicopter heading back to Calgary. Flight Service Station reported weather holding steady across the entire region. Everything was exactly like it should be. But when we reached the glacier, something felt different. Athabasca Glacier stretches for 6 kilometers down from the Columbia icefield. I've landed on it hundreds of times, always in the same spot. A flat area about 2 kilometers up from the terminus where the ice is over 30 meters thick. The landing zone is marked with orange flags that I replace every season. GPS coordinates 52.2 139 degrees north, 117.22284 degrees west. I know that location better than my own driveway, but when I flew over the usual landing spot, the flags weren't there. "That's weird," I said over the intercom. "Looks like the wind took down my markers." I circled around, looking for the flat landing area. The ice looked different somehow, more broken up, with crevasses I didn't remember seeing before. But glaciers change constantly. Ice shifts, new cracks form, old ones close up. After 22 years, you learn to read the ice like a book. I found what looked like solid ground about 100 meters from my usual spot. The surface appeared flat and thick, with no visible cracks. I brought the bell down slowly, watching for any signs of instability. The skids touched down gently on the ice. Everything felt solid. "All right, folks, we've got 45 minutes to explore," I said, shutting down the engine but keeping the rotors spinning slowly for quick takeoff. "Stay within 50 meters of the helicopter, watch for cracks in the ice, and don't get too close to any crevasses." Tom and Ashley climbed out, both moving carefully on the slick surface. The ice was that incredible blue-white color that tourists always love, and they started taking selfies right away. I stayed near the helicopter, monitoring the radio and keeping an eye on my passengers. That's when I first heard the sound. It was low and deep, like a bass note you feel in your chest more than hear with your ears. The ice was groaning. Now, glaciers make noise. They're always moving, always under pressure. But this sound was different, louder, more urgent. "Hey, Steve," Ashley called out. "Is it normal for the ice to make that noise?" Before I could answer, I heard something that made my blood go cold. A crack, sharp and loud as a gunshot, echoing off the mountains around us. The crack appeared right between Tom and Ashley's feet. 1 second they were standing on solid ice. The next second there was a black line zigzagging between them. The sound was like thunder, but coming from underneath us instead of above. "Get back to the helicopter now!" I shouted. But even as the words left my mouth, I could see more cracks spreading across the landing zone like a spider web. The ice wasn't just breaking, it was collapsing. 22 years of glacier flying, and I'd never seen anything like it. Tom grabbed Ashley's hand, and they started running toward the helicopter. But a massive crevasse opened up directly in their path, swallowing the ice with a roar that echoed through the mountains. The gap was at least 25 feet wide and so deep I couldn't see the bottom. I fired up the engine immediately, but I couldn't take off with passengers on the ground. The helicopter's emergency protocols are clear. You never abandon people on the ice. But I also couldn't land on the other side of the crevasse. The ice there was breaking up too fast. "I'm going to hover over you," I radioed to Tom and Ashley. "I'll drop the rescue line." But when I pulled up on the collective to lift off, I could see that the ice platform Tom and Ashley were standing on was getting smaller by the second. Chunks were falling into the crevasse with crashes that sounded like buildings collapsing. I brought the helicopter into position and lowered the rescue cable. Tom was trying to jump the gap to reach it, but the ice was too slippery. He got a running start, slipped on the edge, and disappeared into the blue depths of the crevasse. Ashley screamed his name. I could hear him yelling as he bounced off the ice walls on his way down, getting fainter and fainter until there was nothing but silence. Now Ashley was alone on a piece of ice about the size of a car. I could see it tilting toward the crevasse as more chunks broke away underneath her. She was lying flat, trying to spread out her weight, but I could hear the ice cracking even over the helicopter's engine noise. The temperature was -10°C. Ashley wasn't wearing proper cold weather gear, just a winter jacket and gloves. I could see her engagement ring actually freezing to her finger, the metal conducting the cold right into her skin. I radioed for emergency assistance, but we were 80 kilometers from the nearest rescue base. Other helicopters would take at least 2 hours to reach us. The RCMP, Parks Canada, Mountain Rescue. I called everyone, but Ashley didn't have 2 hours. The piece of ice she was on kept getting smaller. I could see her starting to shake from the cold, and her movements were getting slower. Hypothermia was setting in fast. "Ashley, I'm going to try to get closer," I told her. "When I drop the line, grab it and don't let go no matter what." But as I maneuvered the helicopter into position, something impossible happened. Ashley started reaching toward empty air like someone was there helping her. She was hallucinating from the cold, seeing Tom climbing out of the crevasse to save her. She reached too far toward the hallucination and started sliding toward the crack. At the last second, she managed to grab onto a small ice formation sticking out of the wall. Now she was hanging over a bottomless crevasse, holding on with hands that were too cold to grip properly. I watched her fingers slip one by one from the ice. I watched her fall into the depths, her scream echoing up from the glacier until it faded to nothing. The rescue helicopters found me 3 hours later, still hovering over the crevasse. I was running low on fuel and couldn't speak coherently. They had to guide me back to base and practically carry me out of the cockpit. The ice specialist said the glacier was undergoing something called rapid dynamic breakup, a rare event where temperature changes cause massive sections of ice to collapse all at once. Climate change was making it more common, but it was still unpredictable. The weather had been perfect, but underneath the surface, the glacier was already failing. Search and rescue teams lowered cameras and equipment 300 feet into the crevasse, but they never found Tom and Ashley's bodies. The ice had closed up again, sealing them somewhere deep in the glacier. The specialists said their bodies would eventually move toward the ocean as the glacier flows downhill, but that process takes decades. I still work for mountain-high helicopter tours, but I don't do glacier landings anymore. J. Bust scenic flights, staying well above the ice. The company was cleared of any wrongdoing. The investigation showed that I followed all safety protocols and made the right decisions under impossible circumstances. But Tom and Ashley's families sued anyway. They said I should have known the glacier was unstable. How do you explain to someone that glaciers don't follow schedules? That ice that's been solid for centuries can collapse without warning? I've had nightmares every night for 8 months now. Not about the helicopter or the flying, I still love flying, but about watching 2 people disappear into the earth while I hovered helplessly above them. About how Ashley reached for a hallucination of her dead fiancé and fell into the darkness. Sometimes I dream that I'm the one hanging from that piece of ice, feeling my fingers slip one by one, knowing that 300 feet of empty space is waiting below me. The glacier is still there. Tours still fly over it. But nobody lands on it anymore. The tour companies won't take the risk. There are orange warning flags now marking the area where Tom and Ashley disappeared. If you're ever on a glacier tour and your pilot wants to land on the ice, ask him how long he's been flying those mountains. Ask him if he's ever seen ice collapse without warning. Ask him if he's prepared to watch his passengers disappear into the earth while he hovers overhead, powerless to save them. Because sometimes the mountains don't care how experienced you are. Sometimes nature reminds you that all your training and all your equipment can't save people from forces that are bigger than anything human beings were meant to face. Tom and Ashley are still down there, somewhere in the ice, slowly moving toward the sea. And every time I fly over that glacier, I know they're listening to the sound of my helicopter passing overhead, waiting in the darkness for someone to find them. My name is Robert Mitchell, and I've been working as an insurance adjuster for 15 years. I started right after I got out of the Army in 2010. My job is pretty simple. When people file claims for accidents, fires, or break-ins, I go check out the damage and figure out how much money the company should pay them. I've seen everything from kitchen fires to tornado damage to crime scenes that would make your stomach turn. After dealing with combat zones overseas, I thought nothing could really shake me anymore. But what happened in March of 2025 at a cabin in rural Montana changed everything I thought I knew about my own mind. Sometimes the scariest enemy is the one inside your head. I'd been putting off writing about my military service for years. My therapist at the VA kept saying it would help with my PTSD, but I always found excuses. Work was too busy, my apartment was too noisy, I didn't have enough time. The truth was, I was scared of digging up all those memories I'd buried. Finally, my boss Jennifer gave me 3 weeks of vacation time that I had to use or lose. She said I looked burnt out and needed a real break. So I decided this was it. I was going to rent a cabin somewhere quiet and finally write my story. Maybe even turn it into a book someday. I found this place online called Pine Ridge Cabin, about 200 miles north of Billings. The pictures showed a small log cabin surrounded by nothing but trees and mountains. The description said it was 80 miles from the nearest neighbor, with no cell service and just a landline phone for emergencies. Perfect. No distractions. No excuses. The owner, a guy named Frank Morrison, met me at the cabin on March 1st to hand over the keys. He was probably 60 years old with gray hair and hands that looked like they'd built half of Montana. "Phone's on the kitchen counter," Frank said, pointing inside. "Generator's out. Back if the power goes out. But it should stay on unless there's a bad storm. There's enough firewood stacked on the porch to last you a month." I looked around at the single room with a bed, desk, small kitchen, and bathroom. It was perfect, simple, and isolated. "Nearest store is about 40 miles south in Cedar Falls," Frank continued. "But I see you brought plenty of supplies." He was right. My truck was loaded with cases of canned soup, beans, crackers, bottled water, and enough coffee to keep me wired for weeks. I even brought my own generator backup battery and some solar panels, just in case. "Weather forecast shows a big storm system moving in around day 4 or 5, Frank warned. "Could knock out power for a few days. But you seem prepared?" After Frank left, I sat at the wooden desk and opened my laptop. The silence was incredible. No traffic, no neighbors yelling, no sirens, just wind through the pine trees and the occasional bird call. I pulled up a blank document and started typing. Chapter 1. Basic Training. The first 3 days were amazing. I wrote for 8 to 10 hours each day, taking breaks only to eat canned soup and walk around outside. The words flowed like they hadn't in years. I wrote about joining the Army at 18, about the friends I made in boot camp, about how proud I felt wearing the uniform for the first time. By day 3, I had almost 50 pages done. This was working better than I'd ever imagined. Then the storm hit. I woke up on day 4 to the sound of wind howling like a freight train. Rain hammered the roof so hard I could barely hear myself think. Around noon, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I tried the landline phone. Dead. No dial tone at all. "No problem," I said out loud, just to hear something other than the storm. Frank said this might happen. I fired up my battery backup system and kept writing by the glow of my laptop screen. Actually, the candlelight made the cabin feel cozy. I was writing about my first deployment to Afghanistan, remembering details I hadn't thought about in years. The storm lasted 2 more days. When it finally stopped on day 7, the silence felt even deeper than before. The power was still out, and the phone was still dead. But I didn't mind. I was making real progress on my book. That's when I started talking to myself. "Okay, Robert," I said while making coffee on the camping stove. "Today we write about the IED incident." It felt good to hear a human voice, even if it was my own. After a week of total silence, I was starting to feel disconnected from reality. "Come on, you can do this," I told myself. "Just write it down and get it out of your head." But as I sat down to write about the roadside bomb that killed 3 of my squad mates, something weird happened. I could almost hear their voices. "Hey, Mitchell, you gonna write about how I saved your ass that day?" I spun around in my chair. Nothing there. Just shadows dancing in the candlelight. "Just your imagination," I whispered. But the voice had sounded exactly like Tommy Rodriguez, my squad leader who died in that explosion. By day 9, I was having full conversations with my dead friends. "Tommy, do you think I should include the part about the local kids who helped us?" I asked the empty chair across from me. "Hell yeah, man. People need to know there were good folks over there too." "You're right," I nodded, typing away. "And what about when Martinez got that medal?" "Martinez deserved every bit of recognition he got," came another voice that sounded exactly like Staff Sergeant Williams. I knew they weren't really there. I'm not stupid. But after 9 days of complete isolation, hearing their voices felt comforting instead of scary. It was like having my old team back together. On day 11, I started setting extra places at the dinner table. "Soup's ready, guys," I announced, spooning canned chicken noodle into 3 bowls. "Tommy, you get the spot by the window. Williams, you're across from me, like always." I sat down and ate my soup while talking to the empty chairs about our missions, our fears, our plans for when we got home. Plans that Tommy and Williams never got to finish. "Remember that letter you were writing to your girl back home, Tommy?" I asked between spoonfuls. "You never got to send it." "She found someone else anyway," came Tommy's voice, clear as day. "Better that way." The weird part was I could actually hear them responding now, not just in my head. I could hear their voices in the room, coming from the empty chairs. Day 13 was when things got really bad. I was writing about our final mission, the one where the IED went off, when I heard something outside the window. Footsteps crunching through the snow. I grabbed a flashlight and looked out, but saw nothing. Just trees and shadows. But I could swear I heard voices whispering in a language that sounded like Pashto. "Guys, are you hearing this?" I asked Tommy and Williams. "They found us, Mitchell," Williams said, his voice tense. "They followed us here." "Impossible," Tommy replied. "We're stateside now. This is Montana, not Afghanistan." But I could hear them out there. Taliban fighters moving through the trees, surrounding the cabin. I grabbed my flashlight and did a perimeter check, but found nothing except my own footprints from earlier walks. Still, I knew they were watching me. Day 15 was when I saw them for the first time. I was writing by candlelight around midnight when I caught movement outside the front window. 3 figures in desert camouflage, crouched behind trees about 50 yards out. They had rifles. "Contact!" I shouted, diving away from the window. "Tommy Williams, we've got enemy movement to the north." "I see them." Tommy's voice came from somewhere near the kitchen. "Looks like a recon team." "They're probably calling in our position right now," Williams added. "We need to secure this building." I spent the next hour moving furniture against all the windows. The desk went against the front window, the bed against the side window, the kitchen table against the back door. I left small gaps to see through, like firing ports. When I checked outside again, the enemy soldiers were gone. But I knew they'd be back. Day 17, I found proof they'd been there. Muddy boot prints circled the entire cabin. They were bigger than mine and had a different tread pattern. Someone had been walking around the building while I slept. But the weird thing was, I couldn't remember making those prints, and there hadn't been any mud when I'd checked the night before. "They're probing our defenses," Williams explained while I studied the prints. "Classic recon pattern. They'll attack tonight." I spent the day setting up early warning systems. I tied string across the paths leading to the cabin and attached empty cans that would rattle if someone walked through them. I sharpened kitchen knives and made spears out of broken chair legs. By day 19, I'd stopped eating regular food. Everything tasted wrong. The canned soup had a metallic flavor, like it was poisoned. The crackers tasted like chemicals. Even the bottled water seemed contaminated. "They got to our supplies," Tommy said as I spit out a mouthful of beans. "Probably drugged everything while we were asleep." I started eating only snow that I melted myself, figuring it was the only clean water source they couldn't contaminate. My stomach cramped with hunger, but I couldn't risk eating poisoned food. The enemy was getting smarter. Day 21 was when the helicopters came. I was hiding in the basement, wrapped in blankets and clutching a kitchen knife, when I heard the distinctive whop 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 of rotor blades. They circled the cabin for what felt like hours. "Sounds like Blackhawks," Williams whispered from somewhere in the darkness. "Tarashia yours. They're bringing in reinforcements." Then came the smell. Cordite and burning flesh, just like that day the IED went off. The basement filled with smoke that made my eyes water and my throat burn. I could hear Tommy screaming just like when he was dying in my arms. "Help me, Mitchell. I can't feel my legs." "I'm trying, Tommy," I sobbed. "The medic's coming." But there was no medic. There was just me, alone in a basement, reliving the worst day of my life. Day 23, I started documenting everything on the walls. My notebook was full, and my laptop battery had died days ago. But I needed to record what was happening. Future investigators needed to understand the tactics they were using against me. I used charcoal from the fireplace to write on the log walls. Day 23, enemy using psychological warfare, poisoned food supplies, helicopter surveillance at 0300 hours, 3-man recon team observed, expect ground assault soon. The writing felt important, like leaving a message for whoever found my body. By day 25, I'd started using my own blood. I'd cut my hand while sharpening a spear, and the red looked more official than charcoal. Blood doesn't lie. I dipped my fingers in the wound and marked enemy positions all over the cabin walls. Red handprints by the windows where I'd seen movement. Red arrows pointing toward likely attack routes. Red X's marking where I'd set booby traps. "Good thinking, Mitchell," Tommy approved. "Now we can track their movements." The walls looked like a war room. A crazy person's war room, maybe, but it made sense to me. Day 27, I prepared for the final battle. I knew they were coming tonight. The voices outside were getting louder, more confident. They thought they had me cornered. I stripped off all my clothes so they couldn't grab me easily. Using mud mixed with my blood, I painted my face in the camouflage patterns we'd used on night T missions. I looked like a warrior. I'd made weapons from everything I could find. Kitchen knives taped to broken chair legs for spears. A slingshot from rubber bands and a leather belt. Caltrops made from bent forks scattered around the doors. "You ready for this, soldier?" Williams asked. "Hurrah, Sergeant," I replied. "Let's finish this." But when I looked in the cracked bathroom mirror, I didn't recognize the wild-eyed, blood-painted man staring back at me. His hair was matted with mud and filth. His ribs showed through pale skin. His eyes looked like black holes. That wasn't me. That was something else wearing my face. Day 29, everything ended. I was attacking the wall where I'd seen an enemy sniper when I heard a truck outside. Heavy footsteps on the porch, a key turning in the lock. "Contact!" I screamed, grabbing my longest spear. "They're breaching! They're breaching!" The door opened and a figure stepped inside. Tall, gray hair, work clothes. It was one of them. "Jesus Christ," the figure said. "So, what the hell happened here?" I recognized the voice. Frank Morrison, the cabin owner. But that was impossible. He was part of their operation. He had to be. "You're not taking me alive!" I charged him with the spear. Frank jumped backward and started yelling into a radio. "I need police and ambulance at Pine Ridge Cabin immediately. I've got a situation here." More voices outside. Car doors slamming. Heavy boots on the porch. "Fall back to secondary position," William shouted. "We're compromised," Tommy added. "They brought too many." 3 men in uniforms burst through the door, police officers, but I knew they were really enemy soldiers in disguise. "Put down the weapon," they shouted. "Sir, we're here to help you. I know who you really are." I swung the spear at the nearest one. "You're not taking me back there." It took all 3 of them to pin me down. Even then, I kept fighting until they stuck a needle in my arm. As the drugs kicked in, the voices of Tommy and Williams faded away. "I'm sorry, guys," I whispered. "I'm sorry." I couldn't save you. The cabin was destroyed. That's what Frank told the police report. Furniture broken and piled against windows, food rotting in corners, walls covered in blood, mud, and human waste. The smell was so bad they had to wear masks. My writing was everywhere, on the walls, on scraps of paper scratched into the wooden floor with knives. Most of it was about enemy positions and battle plans, but scattered throughout were pieces of my real story. Stories about Tommy Rodriguez and Staff Sergeant Williams. Stories about the friends I'd lost and the guilt I'd carried for 15 years. The doctors said I'd had a complete psychotic break. 29 days of total isolation had triggered every trauma I'd buried since leaving the Army. My brain couldn't tell the difference between past and present, between memory and reality. I spent the next 6 months in a psychiatric hospital. The medications helped, but they couldn't erase what had happened in that cabin. I'd lost touch with reality so completely that I'd nearly killed an innocent man. I had to resign from my job as an insurance adjuster. Who's going to trust someone who's been committed to a mental hospital? I live on disability now, in a small apartment in Billings where my sister can check on me. I still hear Tommy and William sometimes, especially late at night. But now I know they're not really there. They're just echoes of guilt and grief that I never properly dealt with. The therapist says that's progress. I never finished writing my book. Turns out some stories are too dangerous to tell, especially when you're telling them to yourself in complete isolation. The human mind isn't designed to be alone for that long. We need other people to remind us what's real and what's not. Sometimes I drive past the road that leads to Pine Ridge Cabin, but I never turn down it. Frank Morrison had it torn down. After what I did to it. He said no one would ever rent it again after my story got out. Maybe that's for the best. That cabin showed me the scariest truth of all. Sometimes the enemy isn't out there in the darkness. Sometimes the enemy is you. My name is Karen Mitchell, and I've been a dental hygienist for 8 years. But that's not what this story is about. What I really love is nature photography. I started my blog, Wild Florida, 3 years ago, taking pictures of alligators, manatees, and birds around my home state. It grew pretty popular, about 15,000 followers who loved seeing Florida's wildlife up close. I always dreamed of photographing something bigger, something dangerous. Brown bears in Alaska had been on my bucket list since I started the blog. These massive predators can weigh over 1,000 pounds, and watching them fish for salmon is supposed to be one of nature's greatest shows. So last September, I saved up enough money for a week-long trip to Katmai National Park. I researched everything: bear safety rules, the best camera equipment, even took an online wilderness survival course. I wasn't going in blind. I'd watched every documentary, read every guide. I bought bear spray, a whistle, and learned all the rules about making noise so bears would hear me coming. I was confident. Maybe too confident. The flight to Alaska was long, but seeing those endless forests from the plane window made my heart race with excitement. I rented a small cabin about 20 miles from the main salmon fishing area. The park ranger who checked me in was this older guy named Pete. He had scars on his hands and arms. Old bear scratches, he told me with a grin. "First time up here?" he asked, looking at my brand new hiking boots and camera bag. "Yes, sir. I'm here for the bears. I run a nature photography blog." Pete nodded slowly. "Bears are different up here than what you got down in Florida. These brown bears, they're not afraid of much. You follow the rules, make noise, keep your distance, you'll be fine. But remember, this is their home. You're just visiting." I assured him I'd done my homework. Had my bear spray clipped to my belt, my telephoto lens that could shoot clear pictures from 200 yards away, and a solid plan. Find the salmon stream, set up at a safe distance, get amazing shots, go home with incredible content for my blog. The first morning, I hiked about 3 miles to Brooks Falls, where the salmon jump upstream and the bears come to fish. I made plenty of noise on the trail, talking to myself, clapping my hands every few minutes. The forest was beautiful but eerily quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just my footsteps on the dirt path and my voice echoing through the trees. When I reached the stream, I couldn't believe what I saw. The water was full of salmon, their red bodies flashing as they jumped and swam upstream. And the bears, my God, the bears. There were at least 6 of them scattered along the banks, some standing in the water, others lounging on rocks. They were enormous, their brown fur thick and shaggy, muscles rippling under their coats when they moved. I set up my camera equipment exactly 200 yards away, just like the safety guidelines said. My telephoto lens could capture every detail from that distance. I spent the whole first day just watching them fish. They would stand perfectly still in the rushing water, then lightning fast, they'd snatch a salmon right out of the air. It was incredible. That night, I uploaded some photos to my blog. The response was amazing. Comments poured in about how brave I was, how beautiful the shots were. One follower wrote, "These are National Geographic quality. You're living the dream." I felt proud. I was doing something most people would never do, and I was doing it safely. Day 2 was even better. I got to the stream early and found the bears were more active. I watched through my camera lens as they caught fish after fish. My memory cards were filling up with perfect shots. On noon, I noticed one bear that was different from the others. He was massive, probably the biggest one there. His fur was darker than the rest, almost black in some spots. But what really caught my attention was how he acted. While the other bears focused on fishing, this one kept looking around. And several times, I swear he looked directly at my position. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. Bears have good eyesight, and maybe he was just scanning the area like animals do. But as the day went on, I noticed he spent more time looking in my direction than at the salmon swimming right past his feet. I zoomed in on his face through my camera. His eyes were small and dark, but there was something behind them. Intelligence. Like he was studying me, trying to figure out what I was. That made me a little nervous, but I followed all the rules. I stayed 200 yards away. I didn't make any sudden movements. I kept my bear spray ready. Everything was fine. When I packed up that evening, I made sure to make extra noise. I talked loudly to myself, clapped my hands, even sang a little. The bear, I'd started thinking of him as Big Boy, watched me the entire time I gathered my equipment. Even when I started hiking back toward the trail, I could feel his eyes on me. But I made it back to my cabin safely. 2 perfect days, hundreds of amazing photos, and a story that would make my blog famous. Day 3 started wrong. I hiked to the stream like always, making noise, following the trail. But when I got to my usual spot, Big Boy was already there. Not at the stream fishing. He was about 50 yards closer to my position, just sitting on his haunches, facing where I always set up, like he was waiting for me. I stopped walking. This wasn't normal bear behavior. According to everything I'd read, bears might be curious about humans, but they don't typically show that much interest. They're supposed to ignore you if you follow the rules. I decided to set up anyway. Maybe he'd get bored and go back to fishing. I unpacked my camera gear, but I kept glancing up, at him. He didn't move, just sat there, watching me. Through my telephoto lens, I could see his face clearly. He wasn't looking at my camera or my equipment. He was looking at me, making direct eye contact. In all my research, I'd learned that direct eye contact with a bear was bad. It was considered a challenge or a threat. But I wasn't making eye contact with him. He was making eye contact with me. I tried the recommended response. I made myself appear larger by raising my arms over my head. I spoke in a loud, firm voice. "Hey, bear, go on, get out of here." Big Boy didn't move, didn't even flinch. I clapped my hands loudly. "Go on, get." Nothing. He just kept staring. The other bears continued fishing like normal, but Big Boy had no interest in the salmon anymore. His attention was completely focused on me. I decided to pack up and leave. This wasn't worth the risk. I'd gotten plenty of good photos already. But the moment I started putting my camera away, Big Boy stood up, and he started walking toward me. My hands were shaking as I shoved my equipment into my bag. I kept making noise, yelling, clapping, trying to scare him off. But he kept coming, not running, not charging, just walking steadily in my direction with that same focused stare. I backed away from my position, moving toward the trail. "Stay back! Stay back!" Big Boy matched my pace. When I moved faster, he moved faster. When I slowed down, he slowed down. He was following me. This was wrong. This was completely against everything I'd learned about bear behavior. Bears don't hunt humans. They avoid us. They only attack if they're surprised or protecting cubs or food. But Big Boy wasn't protecting anything. And he definitely wasn't surprised. He'd been waiting for me. I reached for my bear spray, but I was still too far away to use it effectively. Bear spray only works at close range, about 20 feet. He was still 40 yards back, just following me at a steady pace. I spotted a cluster of tall spruce trees off to my left. If I could climb one high enough, I'd be safe until he lost interest and left. I'd read that brown bears could climb, but not very well and not very high. I ran for the trees. Behind me, I heard Big Boy's pace change. He was moving faster now, his heavy paws thumping against the ground. I didn't look back. I just ran. I reached the biggest tree and started climbing. The bark was rough against my hands, and the branches were thick enough to support my weight. I climbed about 15 feet up before I felt safe enough to look down. Big Boy was standing at the base of the tree, looking up at me. He reared up on his hind legs, stretching his massive frame toward the lower branches. His front paws, each one bigger than my head, reached up about 8 feet. He was still 7 feet short of reaching me, but seeing him stand at his full height, probably 9 feet tall, made my stomach drop. I was trapped. Big Boy settled back down on all fours and began circling the tree. Not pacing randomly, circling with purpose like he was studying the trunk, looking for the best way up. Every few minutes he'd rear up again and reach for the branches. I pulled out my cell phone. No signal, of course. I was miles from any cell tower. As the sun started setting, I realized Big Boy wasn't leaving. Most bears would lose interest after a while and go find food or return to their territory. But Big Boy just kept circling, occasionally standing up to test his reach. Through my camera lens, I watched his face. There was patience there, intelligence. Like he understood that I had to come down eventually, and he was willing to wait. Night fell, and the temperature dropped. I hadn't brought warm clothes for an overnight stay in a tree. I was wearing just jeans and a light jacket. The wind picked up, making the tree sway slightly, and I had to grip the trunk tighter to stay balanced. Big Boy settled down at the base of the tree, but he didn't sleep. Every time I shifted position or made the slightest noise, his head would snap up and he'd look directly at me. Those dark eyes reflecting what little moonlight filtered through the forest canopy. I tried to stay awake, but sometime during the night, exhaustion took over and I dozed off. I woke up just before dawn, stiff and freezing, to find Big Boy in exactly the same position. He'd waited all night. As the sun came up, I thought maybe Big Boy would go back to the stream to fish. Bears need to eat, especially during salmon season when they're building up fat for winter hibernation. Instead, he stood up and stretched like he'd had a good night's sleep. Then he looked up at me and made a sound I'd never heard before. Not a roar or a growl. It was almost like communication, like he was telling me something. I was getting desperate. My water bottle was empty, I was freezing cold, and my muscles were cramping from staying in the tree all night. I had to try to get away. I waited until Big Boy moved to the far side of his circle. Then I climbed down as quietly as possible. When I reached the lowest branch, I dropped to the ground and ran. I didn't make it 20 yards. Big Boy was fast. Faster than I ever imagined a 1,000-pound animal could be. He cut off my escape route and positioned himself between me and the trail back to civilization. I backed against another tree, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Big Boy approached slowly, his massive head lowered, eyes locked on mine. He stopped about 10 feet away, just outside the effective range of my bear spray. And then he did something that made my blood run cold. He sat down, like a dog, and tilted his head slightly like he was curious about me. He wasn't acting like a wild animal anymore. He was acting like he was thinking. I don't know how long we stared at each other. It felt like hours. Big Bo, I just sat there watching me with those intelligent dark eyes, occasionally tilting his head like he was trying to figure something out. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What do you want?" I shouted at him. Big Boy's ears perked forward at the sound of my voice. I backed away slowly and he stood up and followed, I moved left, he moved left, I moved right, he moved right. It was like some horrible game where he was always one step ahead of me. Then I remembered seeing an old cabin about a mile through the forest, probably an abandoned trapper's shelter from decades ago. If I could reach it, I could barricade myself inside and wait for help. I ran. This time, Big Boy didn't just follow. He hunted. I could hear him crashing through the underbrush behind me, but when I looked back, I couldn't see him. He was moving through the forest silently now, like a ghost. I'd catch glimpses of dark fur between the trees, always closer than I expected. The cabin appeared ahead, a small, weathered wooden structure with a metal roof. I sprinted the last 50 yards and threw myself against the door. It was unlocked. I slammed the door behind me and looked for something to barricade it with. There was an old wooden table and I dragged it against the door. Then I pushed a rusty metal chair on top of that. The cabin was small, just one room with a few broken pieces of furniture and some old camping supplies. The windows were small and covered with decades of dirt and spider webs, but I could see outside. Big Boy emerged from the tree line and walked straight to the cabin, like he'd known exactly where I was heading. For the first few minutes, Big Boy just circled the cabin, the same way he'd circled the tree. Then he approached one of the windows and peered inside. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying to stay out of sight, but there wasn't much room to hide. Through the dirty glass, I could see his massive head as he looked around the interior of the cabin. Then he moved to the door. The first impact shook the entire cabin. Big Boy was throwing his full weight against the door, and the old wood was already starting to splinter around the hinges. Crash! The table I'd used as a barricade slid backwards. Crash! I could see daylight through cracks in the door frame. Crash! The metal chair fell over. I grabbed an old camping knife from one of the shelves. Not much of a weapon against a 1,000-pound bear, but it was all I had. Crash! The door exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal hinges. Big Boy had to duck his head to fit through the doorway, but he squeezed his massive body into the cabin. In the small space, he looked even larger. His shoulders touched the walls on both sides. I pressed myself into the far corner, holding the knife out in front of me with shaking hands. Big Boy looked around the cabin calmly, like he was inspecting it. Then his eyes found me. He approached slowly, his massive paws making the old floorboards creak with each step. I could smell him now, a wild, musky scent mixed with the odor of fish and something else, something predatory. When he was about 6 feet away, I dove under the old bed in the corner. Big Boy's huge paws appeared at the edge of the bed frame, each claw as long as my finger. I could hear his breathing, deep, steady, patient. Warm breath fogged the air under the bed, and drops of saliva fell onto the dusty floor inches from my face. I held my breath, trying not to move, but my whole body was shaking with terror. I couldn't stop the shivering. Big Boy's head appeared under the bed. His dark eyes found mine, and then he reached for me. His massive paw clamped around my ankle. The claws pierced through my jeans and into my skin, and pain shot up my leg. I screamed as he dragged me out from under the bed. I tried to stab him with the camping knife, but the blade bounced off his thick fur and hide like I was trying to cut leather with a butter knife. Big Boy stood up on his hind legs, lifting me off the ground by my leg. Blood was running down into my boot from where his claws had punctured my skin. The pain was incredible, but the terror was worse. He carried me out of the destroyed cabin and into the forest. I was screaming, begging, trying to grab onto tree branches as he dragged me deeper into the woods. But Big Boy was too strong, and he seemed to know exactly where he was going. My camera was still hanging around my neck, and somehow it was still recording. Later, the search teams would find that footage, shaky, chaotic video of tree branches and forest floor as Big Boy carried me to whatever place he'd chosen. I don't remember everything that happened next. The pain and fear and shock made everything blur together. I remember the smell of his breath, the sound of his breathing, the feeling of being completely powerless against something so much stronger than me. I remember thinking about my blog followers, wondering if they'd ever know what happened to me. I remember thinking about my patients back in Florida and how I'd never see them again. and I remember those intelligent dark eyes watching me the whole time. The search and rescue team found the destroyed cabin 3 days later. They followed the blood trail for almost 2 miles through the forest before it led to a cave system in the Rocky Hills. Inside the cave, they found my shredded clothing, my camera equipment scattered around, and what was left of me. The official report said it was a bear attack, a tragic accident involving a tourist who got too close to a dangerous wild animal. The Park Service implemented new safety regulations and increased ranger patrols. But I know the truth. Big Boy wasn't acting on instinct or protecting territory. He was hunting. He had chosen me specifically, studied me for 3 days, and then executed a plan to capture me. The footage from my camera showed something the investigators didn't want to put in their report. In those final moments, you can see Big Boy's face clearly, and what you see there isn't to the mindless aggression of a wild animal. It's intelligence, purpose, maybe even satisfaction. Some bears, I learned too late, are different. Some bears think. Some bears plan. Some bears hunt humans not for food or territory, but for reasons we'll never understand. If you're ever planning to photograph wildlife in remote places, remember this story. Remember that following all the safety rules isn't always enough. Sometimes you're not the photographer, sometimes you're the prey, and sometimes the predator is smarter than you think. My name is Brian Martinez, and I've been working construction in Texas for 8 years now. I started right out of high school, learning the trade from my dad, who's been in the business for 30 years. We build houses, office buildings, you name it. Hard work, good money, and I love being outdoors all day. I've worked through blazing summers, ice storms, and everything in between. Never missed a day for weather. But what happened in Alaska 3 months ago changed everything I thought I knew about the mountains I love so much. Some places aren't meant for people like us. My bachelor party was supposed to be simple. Just me and my best friend Luis heading to Colorado like we do every winter. We've been skiing together since we were kids, hitting every slope from Vail to Aspen. Luis is a mechanic from New Mexico, tough as nails and fearless on the mountain. We both grew up skiing the Colorado Rockies, so we know our way around backcountry terrain. We're not weekend warriors. We're the guys who ski the double black diamonds when everyone else is inside drinking hot chocolate. But Luis had this crazy idea. Dude, for your bachelor party, we should do something epic. I found this helicopter skiing outfit in Alaska. 3 days of powder skiing in the Chugach Mountains. Fresh snow, no crowds, just us and the mountain. The price made my eyes water, $5,000 each. But Sarah, my fiancée, insisted. It's your last big trip before we get married. Live a little. So we booked it. Pacific Heli-Ski out of Anchorage. They promised us the experience of a lifetime. We flew into Anchorage on a Thursday in February. The weather was perfect. Clear blue skies, no wind, and 3 feet of fresh powder had fallen the night before. Our guide, a guy named Jake, who'd been flying these mountains for 15 years, was pumped. You boys picked the right week. Conditions are absolutely perfect. We're going to hit some runs that'll blow your mind. The helicopter ride out to the Chugach Range was incredible. Miles and miles of untouched white peaks stretching to the horizon. No roads, no buildings, no signs of people anywhere. Just pure wilderness. Jake pointed out different peaks through the headset, telling us stories about epic powder days and crazy skiing adventures. See that ridge up there? Jake shouted over the rotor noise. That's where we're dropping you today. Nobody's skied it this season. 3 feet of champagne powder sitting on a solid base. You're gonna love it. At 11 a.m., Jake set us down on a narrow ridge about 4,000 feet up. The moment we stepped out of the helicopter, I knew this was something special. The snow was so deep it came up to my knees, and it was the lightest, fluffiest powder I'd ever seen, like skiing through clouds. You got 3 hours, Jake said, checking his watch. Follow the ridge down to the valley floor. I'll pick you up at the landing zone at 2 p.m. sharp. Weather's supposed to stay perfect all day. Luis was already strapping on his skis, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Bro, look at this snow. We're gonna carve up this mountain like butter. I clipped my GoPro to my helmet and did the same. The view from up there was insane. We could see for 50 miles in every direction. Mountains everywhere, covered in that perfect white blanket. Not a cloud in the sky. "Race you to the bottom," Luis laughed, pushing off down the slope. For the first 20 minutes, it was everything we'd dreamed of. The snow was so deep and light that we were floating on top, making huge powder turns, spraying snow everywhere. I was filming Luis carving these massive S-turns, and he was getting me on his camera too. We were whooping and hollering, having the time of our lives. The mountain was steeper than anything we'd skied in Colorado, but the snow conditions were perfect. Deep enough to cushion any mistakes, stable enough that we felt completely safe. We'd done our research on avalanche safety, and everything looked textbook perfect. No wind loading, no recent temperature changes, and the snow felt solid under our skis. About halfway down the mountain, Luis stopped on a small, flat area to wait for me. I caught up, breathing hard, but feeling amazing. We were both covered in powder, laughing about the sick turns we'd been making. "Dude, this is insane," I said, pulling out my water bottle. "Best skiing of my life." But as I stood there catching my breath, something felt off. Luis noticed it too. He pulled off his goggles and looked around with a confused expression. "You hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" "That's the problem. I don't hear anything." He was right. It was completely silent. Not just quiet, silent. No wind rustling through trees, no birds calling, no distant sounds of the helicopter. Nothing. In the mountains, there's always some kind of sound. But this was like being in a vacuum. "That's weird," I said, but I tried to laugh it off. "Maybe we're just too high up." Luis shook his head. "Nah, man, this doesn't feel right. Mountains aren't supposed to be this quiet." We stood there for maybe 2 minutes, just listening to the silence. It was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Even our voices seemed muffled, like the mountain was swallowing every sound we made. I was about to suggest we keep skiing when Luis grabbed my arm hard. "Brian, look up." I followed his gaze up the mountain, and my blood went cold. About 200 yards above us, a thin crack had appeared across the entire snow face. It was maybe an inch wide, but it ran from one side of the slope to the other, probably 400 yards across. "That wasn't there before," Luis whispered. As we watched, the crack got wider. What started as a hairline became a dark line in the snow. Then we heard it. A deep, rumbling sound, so low I felt it in my chest more than heard it with my ears. "Oh no," Luis said. "Oh no, no, no." The crack opened up to maybe a foot wide, and the rumbling got louder. Above us, the entire face of the mountain, hundreds of thousands of tons of snow, started to shift. "Avalanche!" I screamed. "Go! Go! Go!" We pushed off as hard as we could, skiing at angles to try to get out of the path. But the avalanche was at least 500 yards wide. There was nowhere to go. The sound behind us was like a freight train mixed with thunder. I looked back once and saw a wall of white death, maybe 100 feet high, racing down the mountain at us. It was moving faster than anything I'd ever seen, probably 80 miles per hour and accelerating. Luis was skiing to my left, trying to reach some rocks that might give us protection. But the avalanche was too fast, too wide. We weren't going to make it. The roar was deafening now. I could feel the ground shaking under my skis. The wave of displaced air hit us first, a blast of wind so strong it nearly knocked me over. Luis disappeared first. 1 second he was there, carving desperately through the powder. The next second the white wall swallowed him completely. No scream, no nothing. Just gone. I tried to ski with the avalanche, staying on top like they teach you in avalanche safety courses. For maybe 10 seconds I was actually riding the surface of the slide, skiing on top of the churning snow. I thought I might make it. Then the mountain grabbed me. It felt like being hit by a truck, then thrown into a washing machine. The force ripped my skis clean off my feet. My poles were torn from my hands. I was tumbling head over heels, spinning in every direction, completely unable to tell which way was up. The snow wasn't soft anymore. It was like being pounded by concrete blocks, hitting me from every angle. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think, just chaos and violence and the incredible roar of the mountain trying to kill me. I managed to get one hand up over my face before everything went black. When the avalanche stopped, the silence was instant and complete. But this silence was different from before. This was the silence of being buried alive. I couldn't move. At all. The snow around me had turned hard as concrete the moment it stopped moving. My left hand was in front of my face, creating a small pocket of air, maybe the size of a basketball. My right arm was pinned against my side. My legs were locked straight, held tight by tons of compressed snow. I tried to move my fingers. They worked, barely. But when I tried to dig, the snow wouldn't budge. It was like being encased in cement. The first thing I noticed was my breathing. Each breath was an effort. The air in my little pocket was getting warm and humid. I was rebreathing my own carbon dioxide, and there wasn't much fresh air getting in. I tried to yell for help, but my voice was completely muffled. Even screaming at the top of my lungs, I could barely hear myself. The sound just died a few inches from my mouth. I had no idea how deep I was buried. Could be 5 feet, could be 50. Without being able to move, I couldn't tell which way was up or down. The snow pressed against my chest so tight that I had to fight for every breath. That's when the panic really set in. I was buried under God knows how much snow, probably 20 or 30 feet down, with only enough air for maybe 30 minutes. Luis was somewhere down here too, probably dead already. The helicopter wouldn't be back for 3 hours, and even then, Jake would just see smooth, undisturbed snow where we used to be. I could taste blood in my mouth. My nose felt broken and something sharp was digging into my ribs, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the terror. I was going to die down here, slowly suffocating in the dark, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I tried to stay calm, to breathe slowly and conserve oxygen, but every breath was harder than the last. The carbon dioxide was building up, making me drowsy. I kept catching myself starting to fall asleep, then jerking awake in terror. Time became impossible to track. Was I down here for 10 minutes or 2 hours? The darkness and the struggle to breathe made everything feel like an eternity. Then I heard it, the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Jake was looking for us. He had to be. The pickup time was 2 p.m., and when we weren't at the landing zone, he would have started searching. I tried to scream to make any sound that might carry up through the snow, but it was hopeless. Even if I could have yelled loud enough, the snow was too thick, too dense. My voice was probably traveling maybe 3 inches before being absorbed completely. The helicopter sound got closer, then farther away, then closer again. Jake was doing search patterns, probably looking for any sign of us. Equipment, skis, anything that might show where we'd been caught. But there was nothing to see. The avalanche had swept the entire slope clean, leaving behind nothing but smooth, innocent-looking snow. We were gone, erased from the mountain like we'd never existed. The helicopter sounds kept circling for what felt like hours, getting more and more distant each time. Finally, they faded away completely. Jake had to return to base before dark. He'd be back tomorrow with search teams, but by then it would be too late. My breathing was getting more labored. Each breath required real effort, and I was getting less oxygen each time. The carbon dioxide was making me lightheaded, almost drunk feeling. My thoughts kept drifting to Sarah back home in Texas. She was probably picking out flowers for our wedding, planned for June. She had no idea that I was dying under tons of snow in Alaska, that I'd never make it home to marry her. I thought about my dad, how proud he'd been when I'd told him about this trip. "Be careful up there, son," he'd said. Mountains don't care how tough you think you are." He was right. The mountain didn't care that Luis and I were experienced skiers. It didn't care that we'd done our research and followed all the safety protocols. It didn't care about our families waiting for us at home, or our jobs, or our dreams. The mountain just did what mountains do, and we were too small and too weak to matter. The drowsiness was getting stronger. My body was starting to shut down from lack of oxygen. Part of me wanted to just let go, to stop fighting and let the darkness take me. It would be easier than suffocating inch by inch. But I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah, about my parents, about the life I was supposed to live. I fought to stay awake, to keep breathing, even though I knew it was hopeless. The snow pressed against me from all sides, cold and patient and final. I was part of the mountain now, just another piece of debris buried under the avalanche. In the spring, when some of the snow melted, search teams might find pieces of our equipment, but our bodies would stay frozen in the mountain forever. That's where I am now. Still buried somewhere in the Chugach Range, preserved in ice like some kind of prehistoric specimen. The mountain claimed us, and it's never letting go. The rescue teams looked for us for 2 weeks before officially calling off the search. The avalanche zone was too big, too dangerous to keep searching. They sent our families death certificates and our personal effects, but our bodies are still up there waiting in the snow. If you're planning a trip to Alaska, to any mountains really, remember Luis and me. The mountains are beautiful, incredible, amazing experiences. But they're also killers. They don't care about your skill level, or your safety equipment, or your plans to get married in June. Respect the mountain, because it sure doesn't respect you. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been managing restaurants for 8 years now. I started as a server at a chain restaurant in Dallas right after college, worked my way up to shift leader, then assistant manager, and finally got my own place to run. The Lone Star Grill in downtown Houston. It's not glamorous work, long hours, angry customers, staff that calls in sick every weekend. But I'm good at it. I can handle a full house on Friday night, deal with drunk customers, and keep my kitchen running smooth even when we're short-staffed. I've handled health inspectors, food poisoning scares, and that one time when a customer had a heart attack right at table 6. I thought I could handle anything. But what happened during my backpacking trip through Alaska last September changed everything I thought I knew about fear, and about what's really out there in the wilderness. Some things hunt in packs, and some of those things aren't entirely animal. The trip wasn't my idea. Amy Chen, my old college roommate, had been bugging me for months to take a real vacation. Amy's a nurse at Houston Methodist, works in the ER, and she kept saying we both needed to get away from our crazy jobs. She had this whole plan, a week of backpacking through remote Alaska. Just the two of us, like old times. "When's the last time you took more than 2 days off?" she asked me over coffee in June. She was right. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. The restaurant business doesn't really allow for it. There's always some crisis, some staff emergency, some reason why I need to be there. But Amy wore me down. She handled all the planning, flights to Anchorage, then a smaller plane to Kotzebue, then a boat across the Sound to drop us off at the edge of the Noatak River Valley. The most remote place she could find, she said. No cell towers, no other hikers, just us and nature for 6 days. And I should have paid more attention to the locals in Kotzebue. We spent one night there before our drop-off, staying at this tiny bed and breakfast run by an Inupiat family. The owner, an elderly woman named Mary, kept asking if we were sure about hiking alone in that area. She kept using this word, adlet, and speaking in her native language to her husband. They looked worried. "What are adlet?" Amy asked. She's always been more curious than me. Mary exchanged glances with her husband. "Old stories," she said finally. "Things that walk on 2 legs like men, but hunt like wolves. Very old stories." Amy laughed it off. "Local folklore," she whispered to me later. "Every remote place has monster stories to scare tourists." I wasn't laughing the next morning when Mary pressed a small carved bone charm into my hand. "Keep this," she said, "and don't camp near running water. They follow rivers." I stuffed it in my pack and forgot about it. I wish I hadn't. The boat dropped us off at the mouth of the Noatak on a gray September morning. The pilot, a weathered guy named Jake, looked as worried as Mary had. "I'll be back at this exact spot in 6 days," he said. "If you're not here, I'll assume the worst and call search and rescue." "We'll be here," Amy said confidently. She had our route all mapped out, 20 miles upriver, then a loop back through the hills. Nothing too challenging for 2 women in decent shape. The first 2 days were perfect. Clear skies, beautiful scenery, and that incredible Alaska silence that seems to go on forever. We made good time, set up camp each night without problems, and Amy's freeze-dried meals actually tasted decent after a day of hiking. It was on the 3rd morning that everything changed. We woke up to find tracks around our campsite. Not unusual by itself. Bears and wolves are common in that area. But these tracks were wrong. I'm not a wilderness expert, but I grew up in Texas and spent enough time outdoors to know animal prints. These started out looking like wolf tracks, but as they got closer to our tent, they changed. The back paws looked normal, like a large wolf, maybe 80 or 90 pounds. But the front paws were different, longer, almost like hands, but with claws instead of fingernails. And the gait was wrong too. Wolves walk on 4 legs. These tracks showed something that walked on 2 legs, then dropped to 4, then back to 2 again. "Look at this," Amy said, crouching next to the clearest print. As a nurse, she notices details. "See how deep this impression is? Whatever made this is heavy, really heavy. But look at the stride length." She paced it out. 7 feet between prints when it was walking upright. I'm 5'6", and my normal walking stride is maybe 2.5 feet. This thing had to be enormous. "Maybe it's a bear walking on its hind legs," I suggested. Amy shook her head. "Bear paws don't look like this, and bears don't alternate between 2 legs and 4 legs like this." We followed the tracks for about 50 yards. They circled our entire campsite 3 times, getting closer each circle. On the final circle, they came within 10 feet of our tent. Whatever it was had been watching us sleep. The tracks disappeared at the river's edge, but on the opposite bank, we could see where something large had climbed out of the water. More tracks led away into the forest on the other side. "We should head back," I said. "It's just an animal, Sarah, probably more scared of us than we are of it." But Amy's voice had that forced cheerfulness she uses with scared patients in the ER. She was trying to convince herself as much as me. We packed up quickly and started hiking deeper into the valley. I kept looking back over my shoulder, but the forest behind us stayed quiet. Too quiet, actually. I realized I hadn't heard any birds since we'd found the tracks. That afternoon we found more tracks, and these ones were fresh, still filling with water from the morning dew. EW. Whatever was making them was close. Very close. By evening, we'd counted at least 6 different sets of prints following our trail, all with that same strange mixture of wolf and human characteristics, all much larger than normal wolves. "Pack animals," Amy said as we set up our tent beside a small creek. "Wolves hunt in packs. That's probably all this is." But I remembered what Mary had said about not camping near running water. I didn't mention it to Amy. She was already nervous enough. As darkness fell, we heard the first howl. The howling started just after sunset when the forest was that deep gray color right before full darkness. One long call from somewhere upriver, maybe a mile away. It sounded like a wolf, but wrong. Too deep, too long, and with an odd warbling quality at the end. Then another howl answered from downriver, then another from across the valley. Within minutes, we were surrounded by howling from at least 6 different directions. "Wolves," Amy said firmly, but she was gripping her flashlight so tight her knuckles were white. "Just a pack of wolves." But I'd heard wolves before during camping trips in East Texas. These howls had something else mixed in, something that sounded almost like human voices trying to imitate wolf calls. Like someone with a very deep voice going, "Ah, woo," instead of a real wolf's howl. The calls went on for about 20 minutes, then stopped abruptly. Complete silence again. Even the small creek beside our tent seemed to be running quieter. Amy managed to fall asleep around midnight, but I stayed awake listening. Around 2 a.m. I heard footsteps in the forest. Heavy, deliberate steps. Something large moving through the trees, trying to be quiet, but not quite succeeding. The steps circled our campsite for what felt like hours. Sometimes they sounded like 2 feet walking upright. Sometimes like 4 paws. But always heavy, always deliberate, always just outside the range of my flashlight. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke up to Amy shaking me urgently. "Sarah, look at this." Dawn was just breaking and our tent was surrounded by tracks again. But this time, there were other signs too. Long scratch marks in the tree bark about 7 feet off the ground. Claw marks that looked almost like fingers. And about 20 feet from our tent, something had been digging in the soft earth. Not like an animal looking for food, but like something burying or hiding something. Amy walked over to investigate the disturbed ground. I heard her gasp. "Sarah, come here. Now." Buried in the loose dirt were bones. Old bones, bleached white by weather. But not animal bones. The skull Amy was holding up was unmistakably human. A human skull with teeth marks around the eye sockets and temple. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now." But Amy was in full nurse mode, examining the remains with professional detachment. "This person's been dead for years, decades maybe. Look at these bite marks. Whatever killed them had huge teeth. And these bones..." She held up a femur with deep gouges. "These look like claw marks, but they're too big for any normal predator." While Amy was focused on the bones, I noticed something else. Fresh digging around the burial site. And a few feet away, another disturbed area. Then another. This wasn't just one grave. This was a cemetery. A hidden cemetery of people who had been killed and buried by something in these woods. "Amy, we need to go. Now." She finally looked up and saw the fear in my face. She looked around and realized what I was seeing. At least a dozen disturbed patches of ground in a rough circle around our campsite. We packed in record time and started hiking back toward the pickup point. But after 2 hours of hard walking, I realized something was wrong. The landscape didn't look familiar. We should have been retracing our steps from yesterday, but nothing looked the same. Amy checked her compass, then checked it again. "This doesn't make sense. We've been walking southeast for 2 hours. We should have hit the main river by now." She pulled out her GPS unit, one of those expensive ones that doesn't need cell towers. The screen flickered, showed our position for a few seconds, then went blank. "Battery must be dead," she said, but I could hear the worry in her voice now. She tried her backup GPS. Same thing, flickered and died. "Electronics fail sometimes," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. We kept walking, but I had a growing feeling we were going in circles. The trees all looked the same, but I kept seeing the same fallen log, the same distinctive boulder, the same lightning-struck pine tree. By afternoon, we had to face the truth. We were lost. And we weren't alone. The howling started again as soon as the sun began to set. But this time, the calls were closer, much closer, and they were definitely surrounding us. Amy and I huddled together as the sounds closed in. The howls were coming from maybe 100 yards away in every direction. "Just animals," Amy kept whispering. "Just animals." Then we heard something that made my blood freeze. One of the howls cut off mid-call, and a voice spoke from the darkness. A human voice, but not quite human. "Women," it said in heavily accented English. The voice was deep and rough, like someone with a severe throat injury. "Alone, easy prey." Another voice answered from a different direction. "Hungry, long time since humans came here." Amy grabbed my arm. "That's not possible. That's not possible." But through the trees, we could see shapes moving toward us. Tall shapes walking on 2 legs like people, but moving wrong. Their arms were too long, and they loped rather than walked normally. As they got closer, we could see them more clearly in the moonlight. They looked like people, but wrong. Their faces were stretched out like wolves with long snouts and pointed ears. Their hands had long claws instead of fingernails, and their eyes reflected light like animal eyes. But the most terrifying thing was how they moved together, like a pack, coordinated, intelligent, surrounding us with military precision. One of them, bigger than the others, stepped forward. When it spoke, I could see long canine teeth in its mouth. "Run," it said, and I could hear amusement in its voice. "We like when prey runs." We ran. Through dark forest, over fallen logs, through streams, with the pack howling behind us. Amy still had her flashlight, and in its beam I could see the creatures leaping over obstacles like wolves, but running upright like people. They were faster than us, much faster. But they seemed to be playing with us, staying just close enough to keep us terrified, but not quite close enough to catch us. "This way," Amy gasped, pointing toward the sound of running water. The river! But as we crashed through the undergrowth toward the water, I remembered Mary's warning about rivers. Too late. The pack had herded us exactly where they wanted us. We burst out of the forest onto the riverbank, and they were already waiting on the other side. 6 of them standing upright like people but unmistakably inhuman. In the moonlight, I could see their wolf-like faces and glowing eyes clearly. "Trapped," said the big one, who seemed to be their leader. "Now we feed." They started wading across the river toward us, moving through the waist-deep water like it was nothing. Amy and I ran upstream along the bank, but 2 more creatures emerged from the forest ahead of us. We were surrounded. "Climb!" Amy shouted, pointing to a steep cliff face rising from the water's edge. "They can't follow us up there." She was wrong about that, but it was our only chance. We scrambled up the rocky cliff in complete panic. I felt claws rake across my back as one of the creatures tried to grab me. My hands were bleeding from the sharp rocks, and I could taste blood in my mouth from breathing so hard. Amy made it to a narrow ledge about 30 feet up and pulled me after her. Below us, the creatures were climbing after us, but slower on the steep rock. From our ledge, we could see down into the valley, and what I saw made me understand why no one had ever returned from this area to tell stories about the Adlet. In the moonlight, scattered around the forest floor, I could see dozens of makeshift graves, piles of stones, scraps of fabric, pieces of camping equipment. How many hikers, hunters, and backpackers had disappeared in this valley over the years? One of the creatures reached our ledge and swiped at Amy with its claws. She screamed and kicked at it, sending loose rocks down onto the others climbing below us. "Up!" I shouted. "Keep climbing!" We made it to the top of the cliff just as the pack reached the ledge we'd been on. But instead of following us up, they stopped. The leader looked up at us and spoke in that horrible voice. "We know this land. You don't. Winter comes soon. You starve, or you come down. Either way, we feed." They settled down on the ledge to wait. Amy and I spent the next 3 days on top of that cliff. No food, no water, except what we could collect from a small depression in the rocks when it rained. The creatures took turns watching us, never more than 1 or 2 at a time, but always there. On the 3rd morning, we heard a helicopter. Search and rescue found us on that cliff, dehydrated and nearly unconscious. I tried to tell the paramedic about the creatures, but all he said was, "Hypothermia can cause hallucinations, ma'am. You're going to be okay." They never found Amy. The official story is that Amy fell from the cliff during our rescue attempt. They found her body 3 days later at the bottom of the gorge, but the condition. The search and rescue team said it looked like wild animals had gotten to her. I tried to tell the authorities about the Adlet, about the graves, about what really happened. They sent me for psychiatric evaluation. The doctor said I was suffering from survivor's guilt and trauma-induced hallucinations. I don't manage restaurants anymore. Can't handle being responsible for people's safety when I know what's really out there. I work from home now, doing bookkeeping for small businesses, safe, quiet work that doesn't require me to protect anyone. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear howling outside my window, even here in Houston, hundreds of miles from Alaska. And sometimes I find tracks in my backyard that look almost human, but not quite. Mary's bone charm is still in my jewelry box. I never take it off when I leave the house, and I never ever go camping anymore. If you're planning a trip to remote Alaska, remember what the locals tell you. Those old stories exist for a reason, and if you do go, don't travel in pairs. The Adlet prefer easy prey. 2 women alone in the wilderness? That's exactly what they're hunting for.